Airavati Karve, MA, Bombay, PhD in Berlin. Reader in Sociology, Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, Pune. Pune, 1953. Code number M41, first edition, 1000 copies, November 1953. Price rupees 15. All rights reserved. Published by Dr. S.M. Katre for the Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, Yerwada, Pune 6. Printed at the GS Press, Mount Road, Madras. Dedication to my husband. While dedicating to you this book, which would never have been either thought out or written but for you, let me express my feelings in the traditional Hindu manner. I place my head on your feet and ask for your blessing. Preface. This book has been in preparation for the last 3 years. I got a chance to work seriously at it during my stay in England in 1951 to 52 at the kind invitation of the School of Oriental and African Studies of the University of London. While there, the first draft of the book was written and many points discussed with Professor Heimendorf and Mr. Louis Dumont. At times, I despaired of ever moving forward with the book and would certainly have ceased writing it, but for the constant goading and ready help of Betty Heimendorf, Professor Heimendorf's wife, whose knowledge of Indian anthropology is very great and whose friendship for a lonely elderly Indian woman in a strange city was even greater and more useful than the former. I also thank Mr. C.S.K. Pathi and Mr. M.S.H. Thompson for their help in elucidating certain Tamil terms. The Humanities Division of the Rockefeller Foundation was another fairy who helped towards this book. I was invited to the United States and traveled from New York to San Francisco, meeting colleagues and talking anthropology with them to my heart's content. The Americans whom I met were never tired of anthropological discussion and were ever ready to exchange views and information. I profited much by this stimulating experience. It was the most heartwarming experience in my life, and I thank Mr. Chadbone Gilpatrick for enabling me to undertake this trip and to all the American colleagues I met for making it so useful to me. At home, my colleagues in the institute were as usual very helpful. Professor Katre, my director, was consulted scores of times about meanings of Sanskrit words and was made use of almost like a dictionary and proved very much better than a dictionary each time. The three Sanskrit Pandits, Messrs. Siddheshwara Sastri, Srinivas Sastri, and Krishnamurti Sharma, were of help on many occasions. Professor Sankalia looked through and clarified for me many of the archaeological and historical references. Without Professor Sankaran's help, the chapter on the southern kinship would not have got its illustrative material. He, with great patience, read Tamil with me and gave me my first taste of the magnificence of the Tamil literary tradition. To all these colleagues, my very grateful thanks. The maps and tables were prepared by my assistant, Miss Kamala Mokashi, with the help of Mr. Z. Sheikh. Miss Mokashi also helped me with collection of kinship terms. On my return, I thoroughly revised the first draft. During this time, I had great help from Doctors John and Ruth Asim, who happened to be in Pune then. The many hours of discussion spent with them there were, I hope, of mutual benefit to us. Lastly, my sincere thanks to those hundreds of my countrymen who helped me, looked after me, and fed me during my travels all over India, in villages and in jungle country. I hope that in future I may get the same welcome and hospitality from them. The governments of Orissa, Mysore, Travancore, and Bihar helped me in my investigation. This help and the help of the people made it possible for my meager research grant to go a very long way indeed. My thanks to them, and may I hope that the same hospitality will be shown to me in future too. The University of Pune gave me a research grant for taking anthropometric measurements in Karnataka. Although that work is being published separately, I record my thanks here also as I was enabled to collect material on kinship organization during my tour. A word of explanation about the absence of an index. When I prepared an index for the first two chapters, I found that not only was it very bulky, but I realized that it was of very little help for purposes of reference. All names of persons, all the kinship terms in English, and the numerous equivalents given in tables had to be included, as also the page references wherever those words were discussed in the text. Thus, a word like father would have about 100 page numbers following it, and that would probably not be of any use to a reader for purposes of reference. I felt that the general arrangement of the book, that is, chapters on different zones, the discussion on the individual words, followed by the discussion on the kinship organization of the zone and the region, would be sufficient to enable a reader to locate the particular reference he was looking for without the help of an index. In conclusion, but for the ungrudging and sympathetic cooperation of the manager of the GS Press and his staff, this book would not have come out in its present format in such record time, and I tender them my grateful thanks. Airavati Karve, Pune, Vijayadashami, October 17th, 1953. Contents: Preface, Introduction, the Kinship Organization of the Northern Zone, the Past, Appendix Kinship Terms in Pali and Ardhamagadi, Chapter 3, the Kinship Organization of the Northern Zone, the Present, Chapter 4, the Kinship Organization of the Central Zone and Appendix, Chapter 5, the Kinship Organization of the Southern Zone, General, Chapter 6, the Kinship Organization of the Southern Zone, the Regions, Chapter 7, the Kinship Organization of the Eastern Zone, Chapter 8, Conclusion, Core Agenda. Maps the Indian Union showing state boundaries. Okay, skip this. Language areas in India: Indo-European languages, Dravidian languages, Austroasiatic. Chapter 1, Introduction, Section 1. Three things are absolutely necessary for the understanding of any cultural phenomenon in India. These are the configuration of the linguistic regions, the institution of caste, and the family organization. Each of these three factors is intimately bound up with the other two, and the three together give meaning and supply basis to all other aspects of Indian culture. From the point of view of the functionalists, the above statement seems like a trite reiteration of the obvious, but it is one thing to assert the interconnection of all phases of a culture, and quite another to demonstrate the exact connection between at least a few aspects of it. I have attempted to do it in this book. A language area is one in which several languages belonging to one language family are spoken. From the Himalayas in the north to the Godavari River in the south, and from Karachi in the west to Guwahati in the east, is a language area in which a majority of the languages spoken belong to the Indo-European family of languages. The second language area is spread roughly from the river Godavari in the north to the southernmost tip of India, and from a few miles east of the city of Sholapur in the west to a little north of Srikakulam on the eastern coast of India. This is the area in which languages of the Dravidian family are spoken. Languages of this family have penetrated northwards deep into the area of the Indo-European languages through East Central India, and one language of this family has spread southward into northern Ceylon and is spoken there at least from the beginning of the Christian era. The third language area, belonging to languages of the Austro-Asiatic family of languages, does not represent geographically a solid contiguous block of territory, as it is broken up by the spread of the Indo-European and Dravidian languages. In India, it consists of the forested areas in Assam, Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, with tiny isolated areas in the central Himalayan foothills and in the forests of central India. Within each language area, we have different linguistic regions. In each of such regions, one language with its dialects is spoken. The major linguistic regions dealt with in this book are as follows. Table A. Language area of the Indo-European family of languages. Column 1, name of the linguistic region. Column 2, the language spoken. Column 3, the designation of the people. Linguistic region Punjab. Language spoken is Punjabi. Designation of the people is Punjabi. Number 2, linguistic region Sindh. Language spoken Sindhi. Designation of the people Sindhi. Number 3, linguistic region of Uttar Pradesh, formerly called United Provinces of Agra and Oudh. Short form in both cases is UP. B, Vindhya Pradesh, and C, parts of Madhya Pradesh. Language spoken is Hindi. Designation of the people is Hindi. Number 4, linguistic region is Bihar. Language spoken is Bihari. Designation of the people is also Bihari. Linguistic region number 5, Bengal. Language spoken is Bengali. Designation of the people is also Bengali. Linguistic region number 6 is Assam. Language spoken is Assamese, and the designation of the people is also Assamese. Linguistic region number 7 or Rajputana or Rajasthan. Language spoken is Rajasthani. Designation of the people Rajput and Marwari. Linguistic region number 8, Kathiawar and Gujarat. Language spoken is Gujarati. Designation of the people Kathiawadi and Gujarati. Linguistic region number 9, Maharashtra, made up of A, Central Bombay State, B, Eastern Madhya Pradesh, and C, Northern Hyderabad. Language spoken is Marathi, and designation of the people is also Marathi. Linguistic region number 10, South Konkan. Language spoken is Konkani, and designation of the people is there is no specific name. Linguistic region number 11 is Orissa. Language spoken is Oriya, and designation of the people is also Oriya. Table B, language area of the Dravidian language family. Linguistic region number 1 is Andhra or Telangana, including Eastern Hyderabad and North Madras state. Language spoken is Andhra or Telugu. Designation of the people is also Andhra or Telugu. Linguistic region number 2, Karnataka, including A, South Bombay state, B, Mysore, and C, West Hyderabad. Language spoken is Kannada. Designation of the people Kannadiga. Linguistic region number 3, language spoken is Tamil, and designation of the people is Tamilian. Linguistic region number 4, Kerala, including A, North Malabar in Madras state, and B, Cochin, and C, Travancore. Language spoken is Malayalam. Designation of the people is Malayali. Linguistic region number 5, Tulunad, includes southern Karnataka and the coastal region between Kannada district and Mangalore. Language spoken is Tulu, and the people are referred to as Band. Linguistic region number 6, Coorg Hills, that is in South Karnataka. Language spoken is Kodagu, and the designation of the people is also Kodagu. Linguistic region number 7 is Nilgiri Hills, comprising North Kerala and South Karnataka. Language spoken is Toda, and the people are also called Toda. The other linguistic regions of Dravidian languages being scattered have no special names, but the names of the people and the geographical location in which they dwell are indicated on the next page. Item A, Malkangiri district of Orissa. Language spoken is Kui and Gondi. The designation of the people is Koya, Kond, and Gond. Linguistic region B is the whole of south and west central Orissa, including Koraput and Fulbani districts. Language spoken is Kui and Gondi. Designation of the people is Gond and Kond. Linguistic region C, the Basta state. Language spoken is Gondi and the people are designated as Gond. Linguistic region D, northern and eastern border of Madhya Pradesh. Language spoken is Gondi and the people are designated as Gond. Linguistic region number E, Kionzar and North Orissa. Language spoken is Gondi and the people are designated as Gond. Linguistic region F, parts of Woon and Adilabad district. Language spoken is Kolami and the people are referred to as Kolam. Linguistic region G, parts of North Orissa and South Bihar. Language spoken is Kuruk and the people are referred to as Oravan or Kuruk. Section C, Table C, language area of the Austroasiatic family of languages. Linguistic region number 1, the whole of South Bihar and northern, west central and parts of southern Orissa. Languages spoken are Mundari, Savara, Juang, Bondo, Gadaba and Bhumia. The designation of people is Munda, Savara, Juang, Bondo, Gadaba and Bhumia. Linguistic region number 2, West Bengal, the Santhal Parigana district. Language spoken is Santhali. The designation of the people is Santhal. Linguistic region number 3, Assam Hills. Language spoken is Khasi. Designation of the people is Khasi. Intercommunication is easy within a linguistic region. The common language makes it the widest area within which marital connections are established and outside of which kinship hardly ever extends. It is a region over which the same folk songs and higher literature has spread. Especially is this the case when a large number of people are illiterate and literature passes from person to person by oral tradition. In this way, most of the devotional literature of medieval India was learnt by the people. The Ramayana of Tulsidas is recited and the stories of Alha and Wudan are sung and told in the villages of Uttar Pradesh. The poetry of the Marathi saints is in the mouths of thousands of illiterate Marathi peasants and artisans. When the same type of stories, songs, and proverbs are met with over very wide areas covering different linguistic regions, the question arises as to whether the different regions acquired these from a common source or whether there are inter-regional agencies which transmit this cultural material from one region to another. Both these factors are at work and show us the interrelation of various regions to one another and ultimately reveal the common fabric which we understand as Indian culture. In this book, I have discussed the kinship terminologies of the three language areas. It would have been possible and would have seemed logical to divide the book into parts dealing with these areas and calling them number 1, Indo-European or Sanskritic, number 2, Dravidian, and number 3, Mundari organizations of kinship. Instead of that, the kinship organizations have been presented in a geographical sequence with number 1 northern, number 2 central, and number 3 southern, and number 4 eastern zones. This procedure was adopted deliberately to emphasize the spatial pattern and interrelation of the kinship organization and the linguistic divisions. The geographical distribution of the different language families in India has been well known. I have tried to relate this configuration with another cultural phenomenon, namely kinship organization. The kinship organization follows roughly the linguistic pattern, but in some respects, sorry, but in some aspects, language and kinship pattern do not go hand in hand. Thus, the Maharashtra region belongs to the area of Sanskritic languages, and yet its organization is to a large extent modeled on that of the Dravidian South, which is its neighbor. The Dravidian North, on the other hand, has been affected to a large extent by the northern neighbors speaking Sanskritic languages. We find that it is not only the people of Karnataka and Andhra whose literature is saturated with Sanskrit words and Sanskrit epics and who use northern terms, but it is also the Varavans and Gonds, the primitive jungle folk who live within the northern linguistic area, who have kinship vocabularies which show over 50% of words borrowed from the Sanskritic languages. For this reason, the kinship material is presented in geographical divisions which are easy to understand and are also brought into relationship with the language areas of India. Such a representation of material enables one to grasp various anthropological problems arising out of this study. The second thing one must know if one wishes to understand any phase of the culture of any group of people in India is the caste system. The structure of the caste system has been well described by many Indian and foreign anthropologists. Some important facts about the caste need to be borne in mind in order to understand many features of kinship organization described in this essay. A caste is a social grouping of hereditary nature. There are many castes in India. These are arranged in a vertical hierarchical manner in such a way that each caste considers itself higher than some and reluctantly admits itself to be lower than some others. Theoretically, each caste has a definite place in the social ladder, but actually, there are many rival castes claiming the same position. Castes have also certain hereditary occupations which used to be jealously guarded by them. Every caste follows more than one craft or profession. Thus, for example, the people of the barber caste in the north, who are called Nai, besides being village barbers, are also messengers who deliver the messages about marriages, death, and other family occurrences from village to village. They also perform minor surgical operations like opening of boils, set bones, and are professional massagists. In certain regions, they serve meals at weddings. Each linguistic region has over 50 major castes, each having either the same or analogous names. For example, some of the major castes in the Maharashtra region are as follows: Brahmin or priests, Vani or shopkeepers, Kayastha are accountants and writers, Maratha are fighters or agriculturists, Kunbi fighters and agriculturists, Mali market gardeners, Sonar goldsmiths, Lohar ironsmiths, Sutar carpenters, Koshti weavers, Dhangar shepherds, Koli or deaver, fishermen, Gawali milkmen, Navi barbers, Parit washermen, Teli oil pressers, Mahar village menials and carriers of dead cattle, Chambhar tanners of skin, etc. These castes are further subdivided into numerous subcastes based on locality, specialization of specialization of craft, immigration from another region, and many other causes. Generally, one finds more or less the same set of castes in each linguistic region. The sameness of may denote analogous social status, but in almost no case represents identity. The functions and the numerical strength of a caste differ slightly from region to region and from town to town. Bhangi or sweeper is a very important caste in northern India. In Maharashtra, all the Bhangis are immigrants from other linguistic regions and are not indigenous. In Bengal, the proportion of Kayastha and Brahmins to the other Hindu population is very much larger than in the other regions. The castes are arranged as said above on a social ladder so that each caste, except the lowest, has some castes below it and some above it. Theoretically, the Brahmins are on the highest rung of the social ladder, but their position has been disputed since very ancient times by another caste. Hindu theory derives all castes from four main social divisions. These are called Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Brahmins are priests, Kshatriyas are fighters, Vaishyas are artisans and traders, and Shudras are farmers and laborers. Besides these four, there is a division of people lower than the Shudra. This comprises the so called untouchables, who form the lowest rung of the ladder. All castes in India are fitted into these four divisions. Each caste is subdivided into many subcastes, which in their turn form a hierarchy within the caste. Thus, the whole caste system is a very intricate structure which places social groups on innumerable and minute steps indicative of status and function. Each subcaste is generally an endogamous group spread over one linguistic region. In Indian anthropological literature, the word caste is sometimes used for the four primary divisions, viz. Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Sometimes it is also used for divisions like Lohar, Sutar, etc., while the word subcaste is used for further endogamous divisions of the major castes. The old Indian word for the primary divisions is Varna, and for the castes which have arisen from them, the word is Jati. In modern Indian languages, the word Varna has fallen out of use, and only the word Jata is used for all major and minor castes. In Maharashtra, there is a caste called Brahmin, which is divided into dozens of endogamous subdivisions called subcastes. In this essay, the word caste is used for the larger divisions, the word subcaste is used for the smaller subdivisions. The endeavor of each caste group is to gain an ever higher position on the social ladder, and of each subcaste to gain a higher position within the caste. This aim is achieved by borrowing certain customs of the higher caste, or by claiming to belong to a higher caste, or by giving the daughters as brides with a big dowry to the men of the next higher subcaste or caste. The following diagram will give an idea of the arrangement of castes as regards status and subdivisions. Order from up to below: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, untouchables. Maharashtra Brahmins, for example, are divided into various subcastes as given below. At the first level, the Brahmins are divided into Desashta, Chitpavan, Karhada, Saraswat, and others. The Deshastha Brahmins are again divided into Rigvedi, Shukla Yajurvedi, and Krishna Yajurvedi. The Shukla Yajurvedi are again divided into Kanva, Madhyandin, and over a dozen other subdivisions. The Madhyandin are again divided into Jabal, Payashe, and others. The step 2, comprising Deshastha, Chitpavan, Karhada, Saraswat, and others, gives the major Brahmin castes. Steps 3 and 4, comprising Rigvedi, Shukla Yajurvedi, Krishna Yajurvedi, Kanva, Madhyandin, and over a dozen other subdivisions, show the subdivisions of one such caste. The lowest of these subdivisions, comprising Jabal, Palashe, etc., has endogamous groups called Jabal, Palashe, etc. The same type of arrangement will be found for each major caste. It is therefore very difficult to designate each division by a separate term, and hence the words caste and subcaste are used for the major and minor divisions without further particularization. Each caste is a complete society within a society, a kingdom within a kingdom. A caste has its own gods, its own temples, its council which regulates social behavior, its hereditary occupation and status, its own customs about food, dress, and marriage. A caste is connected with the rest of the society by this relationship, though important, is not primary from the point of view of an individual. A caste is thus a mechanism by which social groups live side by side with the least intercommunication compatible with togetherness. Even the state in India controlled individual conduct through the caste council. Except for a few crimes like treason, murder, and serious breach of intercaste behavior, all crimes were tried by the caste council and not by a central machinery set up by the state. Within each linguistic region, castes and subcastes show very interesting variations as regards kinship organization and kinship usages. The interrelation of caste and region will become clear from the following examples. One of the major castes engaged in agricultural work is called Kunbi in Maharashtra. There are over 20 subcastes of this major caste. The usual form of marriage among the Kunbis is that of a man with his mother's brother's daughter. In northern and northeastern Maharashtra, the various Kunbi subcastes have the custom by which a widow lives as wife with a younger brother of her husband. This custom is not followed by the Kumbi subcastes of central and southern Maharashtra. In southern Maharashtra, the Kumbis practice cross cousin marriage of both types. That is, a man can marry either his mother's brother's daughter or his father's sister's daughter. Levirate or marriage of a widow to the younger brother of the husband is a northern custom. Marriage of a man to the father's sister's daughter is a southern custom, and the Kunbi practices related above show how the behavior of castes is affected by that of the neighboring region. In the northwest corner of Maharashtra, there is a caste called the Gujar. Unlike other agricultural castes, this caste does not practice caste cousin marriage. Recently, however, one such marriage was allowed by the caste council after a very heated debate for 2 days and after imposing a fine on the families contracting this marriage. I was in the village when this incident occurred. When I asked on what ground the caste council consented to such a marriage, I was told by an elder, quote, one cannot resist the customs of the land in which one lives. After all, a fish cannot wage a feud against water. End of quote. This answer illustrates the process of acculturation which a caste undergoes after settling into a new region. Gujar is a cross cousin marriage. Sorry. This answer illustrates the process of acculturation which a caste undergoes after settling into a new region. Gujar is a pastoral and agricultural caste found in the Punjab, Western UP, and Rajputana. The Gujars of Maharashtra apparently are a section of the northern Gujars who have wandered southwards. Their family names are like the names of Rajput clans. The men speak Marathi, the language of the region, while the women speak a very mixed language. Cross cousin marriage is generally not practiced in the north, but in Maharashtra, the Gujars are surrounded by and live among castes which have the custom. So ultimately, they succumbed to it. There is thus a regional pattern of social behavior. Immigrant castes may either follow the pattern, resist it, or in their turn change it. A region, as we have seen above, may show different local patterns. In Karnataka, there are Brahmin subcastes which practice all the three types of preferential marriages known in the region. There are others who practice any one or the other of the three. Each subcaste gives a reason for its preference as also for its avoidance of certain customs in a region. It might seem obvious that a caste indigenous to a region would naturally follow the pattern of a region. There are, however, castes like Thiyan in Malabar and Kallan in Tamil Nadu, one section of which is patrilineal and another matrilineal. The patrilineal pattern in both these cases seems to be borrowed from some higher castes of the region. Duration of residence in a region also seems to be a factor which influences assimilation, but there are castes which show greater resistance to assimilation than others who apparently have lived for an equal duration. The structure of the caste system encourages isolation and separateness, but the necessity of economic cooperation, common social life in a village, and the commonness of language are forces which encourage assimilation. How is it that there are the same set of castes in each region? Some castes, like Kayastha, have wandered from some one center. Others, like Brahmins, may have been formed in each region with perhaps an immigrant nucleus. Still others seem to be due to functional specialization in one population. The way a regional pattern of social behavior, that is food, dress, marriage, customs, language, and etc., evolves by an interaction of the various castes, is another important problem dealing with the interrelation of caste and the region. The third important factor in Indian life is the family, and by family is meant the joint family here. In India, the joint family has endured for as long as any records exist. In the time of the Mahabharata war, about 1000 BC, the joint family existed more or less as it exists today. Earlier records of the Sanskrit books called Brahmanas and the Vedas justify the inference that the patrilineal and patrilocal joint family was in existence even then. Neither the Muslim nor the British rule was able to modify the structure of this most ancient institution of India. The Industrial Revolution and Western technology introduced by the British is gradually making inroads into the joint family, and one does find in India a few examples of truly single families on the Western model. However, in the great majority of cases, it is still a larger or a smaller joint family which one finds in India. A joint family is a group of people who generally live under one roof, who eat food cooked at one hearth, who hold property in common, and who participate in common family worship and are related to each other as some particular type of kindred. This definition of a joint family needs a certain clarification necessitated by the expression who generally live and eat together. Those people who subsisted solely by agriculture did, as a matter of fact, live and eat together. But in the case of others who engaged in trade or were in the armed forces or in the civil service, some members of the joint family might remain away from home for an indefinite period. A joint family has always an ancestral seat or locality. However humble an Indian may be, he will always refer to his ancestral village as his home. As all service was paid in land in ancient days, every Indian had a small family holding in some village, maybe just a strip of land, or for an artisan, just a small house. This connection of a family with a locality endures for some time, even after a family has finally migrated out of its village. Such families keep on worshipping the gods of their ancient locality or come back time and again to keep certain vows made in connection with these gods. The joint family has a seat, a locus, and is made up of certain kin. The kin group making up a family is of two types. In the northern type, those men who trace descent from a common male ancestor form the core of such a family. With them are associated women who are brought as brides by these males and the young unmarried girls born in the family. Thus, there are three or four generations of males related to a male ego as grandfather and his brothers, father and his brothers, brothers and cousins, sons and nephews, and wives of all these male relatives, plus the ego's own unmarried sisters and daughters. Sometimes a father's sister may come back as a widow, but that is rare, and in the case of castes which allow widow remarriage, such residence is but temporary. The northern family is thus patrilineal and patrilocal, and the married women live in the house of their father in law called Sasural. In Malabar, we meet with the other kind of joint family called Tharwad. From the point of view of a male ego, the members of the family are grandmother, who is mother's mother, and her sisters and brothers, and the mother and her sisters and brothers, own brothers and sisters, and mother's sisters, sons and daughters, and the children of ego sisters. In this family, there are no relations by marriage. The wives of the males are with their own mothers, and the children of the males are also with their mothers. The husbands of the women folk live in the houses of their own mothers and are only occasional visitors of their wives and children. These two types of families and their organization has been fully described in the following pages and need not detain us here. The question as to how great the size of a joint family can be and how long an ever growing family can occupy one locus may be briefly touched here. Every existing joint family is a piece broken off from a larger unit. In one city or a village, there may be even 10 or 12 houses, each sheltering a joint family and all together acknowledging common descent and capable of showing relationship through one male line. Very often, in such cases, one house is known as the ancient house and called the great house. It may still shelter family gods, and all the people of the other houses may have to go to the great house once in a while for certain occasions of common worship. A time may arise when even these ties are broken, and the offshoots may establish their own family gods in their own house. In most Indian houses, one corner of a room is given to the gods. This room, however, whatever its other uses, as storeroom, dining room, or kitchen, is often referred to as Devgar, the house of gods. In richer houses, a separate room may be allotted to the gods. The northern family breaks at the death of the man who first founded the family. He may be the father or a very vigorous grandfather who has succeeded in keeping together four generations of males together. When such a family splits and there is partition, it almost never splits into as many units as there are individual families, but into smaller joint families made up of a man, his wife, children, and sons and daughters, or a man, his sons and daughters, and a couple of younger brothers who wish to have his protection or who may not be old enough to take care of themselves. In such cases, the family gods remain in the ancestral home with the senior branch of the family. If a joint family goes on splitting and forming new groups in new houses, a time comes when the ancestral property being divided at each splitting becomes splintered into uneconomic holdings which cannot support the new joint families. In olden times, when famine, epidemics, and wars constantly removed large sections of populations, a multi branched joint family could possibly go on living on the ancestral site, but with the removal of these agencies of population control and with the possibility of getting employment in modern industrial towns, junior members of the joint family tend to go out. Even so, instead of founding independent families in the towns where they are employed, they tend to keep their ties with the family at home. They send money to the impoverished farmers at home, send their wives home for childbirth, and go themselves for an occasional holiday or in times of need. The urge to visit the family for certain festivities and at sowing and harvesting times is so great that there is seasonal migration of mill laborers in all industrial towns. Even if a man earns good wages, it is difficult for him to find a bride from a decent house if he has no family with some land in some village. The northern family is strong in the unity of its men. This unity tends to break because all the brides are from different houses. Also, there is much rivalry among fathers and sons and among collaterals. In the southern matrilineal family, there are no affinal relations, that is, relations by marriage. Sons may wish for a closer bond with the father, or the fathers may wish to secure property for the sons, but this is debarred by the laws of inheritance. People brought up in patrilineal houses may think that life without fathers and husbands would be impossible, but that is merely a prejudice. What the actual feelings of those who live in the Tharwad are, it is difficult to judge because these communities have been greatly affected by contact with powerful patrilineal communities and sometimes mirror the sentiments of these communities. A serious study of the human values evolved in matrilineal communities before they came in contact with other communities, or at least before they felt the urge to imitate them, must be made from literature, folk tales, and songs, and from studies about personality development. On the face of it, it seems that the southern joint family does not have the internal stresses and strains which lead to the constant breaking of the northern joint family. The rivalry of brothers, co wives, and sisters in law does not seem to form a theme of the songs and proverbs of the matrilineal people. And yet, a Tharawat breaks up into separate units claiming descent from one ancestress. How and why the break occurs, I am unfortunately unable to point out, as I have not studied the Malabar family from that point of view. In modern times, a Tharawat breaks up because of the urge of the males to found single families on the model of the patrilineal single families. An educated man migrates, say, to Delhi or Bombay, where he has a job and lives in a single family made up of his wife and children. Both the husband and the wife leaving the and both the husband and the wife leaving and gradually breaking with their ancestral Tharawats. What is of interest is to find out how the Tharawat broke into several units in olden days. I was told that the Tharawat did not break into several fragments simultaneously as did the northern joint family, but that when a house became too small for its inhabitants, one of the women, together with her elder brother or one of her mother's brothers, was asked to separate. Land would be allotted to her and a new house built, and she would then be the founder of a new Tharawat. I have never been able to test the truth of this statement by referring to the history of Tharawats in any village. Thus, the joint family is a community in itself which provides a person with almost all physical and cultural necessities. A man born in a joint family in the northern zone has a very large number of playmates of his own generation. He may be with the mother during the feeding times only. At other times, he may be looked after by one or two aunts who are father's brothers' wives, or grandmothers who are father's mother or father's brother's wives. He and the other little ones, once they are weaned from the mother's breast, may also be sleeping with their grandmother. His initiation ceremony is generally performed together with cousins of his own age. In India, it used not to be the proper thing for a man to fondle his own child in the presence of other members of the family or when strangers were present. So, a child is generally fondled by one of the grandfathers who are father's father or father's father's brothers or younger uncles who are father's brothers. He is thus not dependent on his own parents physically and psychologically as is a child in a modern European household. His sisters are generally with the women folk. After initiation, which is called Upanayana in Sanskrit, he generally spends much of his time in the company of men or boys. After marriage, he may see his wife now and then moving and working with the other young brides in the house. He ceremonially commences to live with her after she reaches puberty, and then also his sexual life is regulated by the wishes of his mother and aunts. A man can speak to his wife only occasionally when young. When he grows up and has children, he may speak to her, though even then, direct address to her is forbidden by convention. He is fed and cared for by the women folk, but his life is mostly spent in a world of men. The women have a joint life of their own in which adaptation to other women is as important as adaptation to the husband's wishes. When a woman is ill, she is looked after by the other women. When she is in childbed, she is nursed by the other women who also take care of the elder children. Husband wife relationship in such a household does not take up a primary position in one's life. In a patrilineal household, a man does not have to change his ways of life or become a stranger to his old friends because he is married. The wife neither demands nor gets the all absorbing attention that she does in the European household. The woman has far reaching new adaptations to make on her marriage, but they are not in terms of an all absorbing passion and life together of two people. She has to adjust herself to a big group of men and women. The loyalty to the husband is loyalty to the agnatic joint family of the husband. The question of divided loyalties arises only when the husband quarrels with his kin. Though a woman is often depicted as the breaker of the joint family, Not seldom does she bind together the elements which would otherwise fall out. A joint family of this type is always an exciting group to live in. All the time, something of interest is happening there. Now it is the marriage of a girl or a boy. Now it is an initiation ceremony, the birth of a new baby, the puberty rites of a new bride, some particular family ritual, a fast, a feast, sometimes a death. The great extent of the family always ensures the coming and going of guests. The brothers of the brides come to invite them to their mothers' houses. The daughters of the house are being brought home for a family feast or wedding. There is always bustle and expectation, laughter and quarrels, discussions and plans. Life may be complicated, sometimes full of bitterness, but rarely dull, at least from the point of view of the children. The joint family is a miniature world, in some ways standing apart, in others inextricably bound up in a never ending ceremonial of exchanges and gift giving with all the other joint families with whom it has affinal connections. The regulative force outside of the jurisdiction of the family elders is the caste and the village, the caste being its circle for endogamy. In a given radius, all the families in a caste can ultimately be shown to be related to each other, though in a distant manner in the north. The village is the group which mainly regulates the economic life of the joint family. When a famine arises, it is not the caste which migrates but the village. If a group of neighboring villages consist only of one caste, then only that part migrates which is included in one village. Even nomadic castes undertake their yearly migrations in groups of families. Among them, different families have their own itinerary for visiting a certain territory, and other families are not allowed to encroach on their region. The interfamilial behavior is regulated by the caste. As the organization of the family is dealt with in greater detail in the following pages, it need not be gone into further over here. The individual and the family to which he belongs are the primary initiators of behavior which may deviate from the norm set up by the caste. The caste may sanction the innovation, as in the case of a Caucasian marriage among Gujas already quoted above, or may reject the new idea. In the latter case, the individual or even the whole family may be excommunicated. In olden days, excommunication was a terrible thing. A man could not get entrance into the house of a caste member, could not get food or shelter, and had to leave the village because the village always upheld the decision of the caste. The British government made it possible for people to withstand the pressure of the caste because the first reformers were employed by government or semi government agencies which were outside the jurisdiction of the caste or the village. Even so, the caste could make its power felt. A few years ago, in the city of Sholapur in the Bombay state, a rich man of the Vaddar caste tried to defy his caste. Among the Vaddars, there is a taboo against women wearing a bodice. They may wear rich saris and gold ornaments, but must never wear a bodice or a blouse. The gentleman ordered his women folk to wear bodices as the women of all other castes do. He and his family were promptly excommunicated, and after a few weeks of resistance, they had to give up the innovation, make an abject apology, and pay a heavy fine before they were admitted back into the fold. Thus, the linguistic region, the caste, and the family are the three most important aspects of the culture of any group in India. This applies also to what are called primitive tribes of India. These tribes have lived with the others for thousands of years. When the Vedas began their records, the difference between the cultural level of the conquering Aryans and the conquered forest dwellers called Dasyus could not have been very great. Both were illiterate, both were polytheistic. The Aryans had cattle and horses. The Dasyus probably grew rice in jungle clearance. The Aryans needed open country to graze their cattle and for cultivation with the plough. As the jungle was being burnt, the others were driven southwards and eastwards and were thus cut off from active intercourse with the life in the plains. The Aryans and those of the original people who remained with them progressed further, while those who retreated remained in their jungles and possibly lost some features of their original culture. I have called this a process of progressive primitivization. Many other people in India, once known as conquerors and empire builders, have been reduced to a state of poverty and nomadism. The Aryans and the people they conquered freely exchanged ideas, words, materials, and processes. The primitives use a kinship terminology which is made up of Sanskritic words to the extent of 50%. They cannot be treated as an isolated people. The caste and the tribe are two concepts which are almost interchangeable in certain contexts. A caste of today, example the Mahars of Maharashtra, may have been a former tribal group. A group of tribes, for example Rajputs, the Hirs, may function like a caste. The governmental self sufficiency of a caste may be a vestige of a tribal organization. The cultural process in India, where juxtaposed groups live together and where a gradual exchange takes place, makes it possible for the primitive to live side by side with the sophisticated, and one finds again and again the caste groups showing features of primitive organization and the primitives showing the most sophisticated institutions and attitudes. The primitives are an organic part of the Indian life as a whole and cannot be treated separately as something fundamentally different from the rest. A sharp distinction between them and the Indian agriculturalist cannot be made, and yet there are some features which make it necessary to differentiate the forest dwellers from the agriculturists. The forest dwellers are generally called the tribal or the primitive people. They do not have the elaborate caste system of the rest of the Hindu population, though among some tribes there are social divisions which can well be termed castes. In this essay, these people have been designated as tribal or primitive people. The present day cultural problems before India also largely revolve around these three entities, viz., region, caste, and family, as the following examples will show. The tendency is to minimize the differences and establish uniformities. Some people would much rather have a unitary state with one language than a federation of many linguistic states. The new state has abolished in law all privileges and discriminations connected with the caste system. It wishes to abolish the very mention of the word caste. It is planning to establish one civil law for all by abolishing polygamy and polyandry, by condemning cousin marriage, by introducing divorce. A state a state, as the highest regulative system, has a right to shape the lives of the individuals it governs. Welding of the Indian subcontinent into a nation is a great cultural task, but very often the urge for uniformity destroys so much which, from an ethical and cultural point of view, can be allowed to remain. The need for uniformity is an administrative need, not a cultural one. Section 2. The method of investigation. The kinship investigation was started in the year 1938 to 39 in Maharashtra and then extended to other parts of India. While working in Maharashtra, I became gradually aware of what may be termed the cultural gestalt of a linguistic region. Briefly stated, it was as follows. In Maharashtra, there is a group forming about 40% of the total population and made up of various interconnected castes called Maratha and Kunbi. The Marathas claim to be Kshatriyas or warriors, and gradually the Kunbis are calling themselves Marathas and claiming the same rank. This process may be called Marathization in the narrower sense. This group is at its strongest in central Maharashtra. It owns land, is expert in dry farming, has a certain clan organization, has certain marriage customs, and a particular type of kinship organization, which in its turn is based on one type of cross cousin marriage and on class organized on a hierarchical principle. The Marathas claim to be Kshatriyas or warriors, and gradually the Kunbis are calling themselves Marathas and claiming the same rank. This process may be called Marathization in the narrower sense. This group is at its strongest in central Maharashtra. It owns land, is expert in dry farming, has a certain clan organization, has certain marriage customs, and a particular type of kinship organization, which in its turn is based on one type of cross cousin marriage and on clans organized on a hierarchical principle. The kinship terms are almost all purely Sanskritic in origin but reflect a Dravidian kinship organization. Strong patriarchal families with patrilineal succession and inheritance are coupled with certain customs suggestive of strong matrilineal bonds. Around this Maratha Kunbi group of castes can be placed other castes who follow and definitely imitate the Maratha peculiarities. These are castes like the Mali, the Navi or Barber, the Parit or washerman, the Mahar and Shambar, the lowest castes doing work in heights and other menial jobs. Some Brahmin castes, like the Deshastha Rigvedi Brahmins, are closely associated with the Marathas. On the other hand, there are castes which do not, as a rule, allow cross cousin marriage, but which are so far influenced by the common practice of the land that an occasional case of such a marriage is condoned. A minority of castes follow quite different practices. A minority of castes follow quite different practices as regards marriage. All these castes within one region could be arranged in two ways. Number one, according to their connection with the main Maratha Kunbi group, or number two, geographically, that is, according to the territory they occupy within the linguistic region. This double plotting gives an insight into the process of acculturation and accommodation going on within such an area. The model of the Maratha Kunbi group is followed by those Brahmins who have been associated with them regionally, that is, the Brahmin caste named Deshastha Rigvedi. We have another Brahmin caste found primarily in the north and the east of Maharashtra, which is not influenced at all by the Maratha practices. Again, the Kunbis who have come within the Maratha sphere of influence have a social organization very similar to them. But northern Kunbis show a more varied and in some respects widely differing organization. Some castes show complete acculturation, others show a great resistance and appear like isolated cultural islands. A great number of the traits of various castes can be interpreted in terms of functional association and geographical position. Example, the Marathas in the central region sorry, frown upon a man's marriage to his father's sister's daughter. The Marathas in the south practice this form of marriage following the example of the Kannada neighbors. The Rigvedi Deshastha Brahmins of South Maharashtra go a step further and practice the marriage of a man to his elder sister's daughter, a usual form of marriage in Karnataka. Physical proximity, however, is not a sufficient explanation because in the same towns and villages, the Madhyandin Brahmins allow neither of the two types of marriages and stick strictly to their northern customs. Researchers have shown that the Madhyandin Brahmins are latecomers from the north into the area which they occupy now. This insight into the internal structure of a linguistic region was gained through my travels over that region, taking towns and villages in my itinerary. I moved from region to region, taking measurements, blood samples, and collecting information about kinship practices and terminology. The contacts were established through friends, students, and government officials. Supposing I had an acquaintance in Dharwar or in Karnataka, I would make that my first station and then get introduced to the friends or relations of these acquaintances who in their turn would take me to their homes and villages, and so I traveled from place to place, never knowing where my next stop was to be, nor where my next meal was to come from. I take this opportunity to record my heartfelt thanks to the hundreds of people who helped me through these wanderings, who gave me a glimpse into different regional cultures and attitudes and fed me and sheltered me. Rest passes between work, meal times, travel in buses full of people, and in third class railway compartments filled with men and women gave me the opportunities I sought for collecting kinship material. A small beginning would suffice to set the ball rolling, and each would come out with his or her stories. I had naturally to tell also all about myself, about my husband and children, and the parents in law, and the others would tell about their kin. At such times, it was not always advisable or possible to take notes. Kinship terms and situations involving personal narratives or family usages, scraps of songs and proverbs were, however, taken down. The working day meant over 12 hours of work. When there was not material for measurement, the time was spent in canvassing contacts, and there were never enough funds or time to do this type of work for more than 2 months a year. After coming back to Pune, the data would be looked into and verified linguistically by referring to some good dictionary, and then a study of some literature would be undertaken to find out how far the literature reflected the kinship attitudes. These studies were very rewarding. They revealed the intimate connection between literature and social, especially the kinship organization, and helped to interpret certain facts which had seemed obscure to me. Such studies also gave a feeling of sureness while dealing with people. A few examples will suffice to show how necessary these studies are to understand present attitudes. I was collecting material in Gujarat and found out that certain castes practiced junior levirate, while all castes observed certain patterns of behavior which one would expect from levirate customs. Thus, a woman must never speak to and always cover her face in front of the elder brother of her husband, while she can be very familiar with the younger brother of her husband. An old Brahmin objected strongly to my interpretation of the joking relationship between a woman and her husband's younger brother as pointing to sexual mating in the past. He stoutly maintained that to a man, the bhabi, that is, elder brother's wife, was like a mother or an elder sister, and the familiarity was that existing between mother and son or an elder sister and brother. He also pointed out he also pointed out to modern fiction and a cinema film where such a role was depicted on the part of the Barbie. He agreed that among certain castes, levirate was practiced, but denied that the implications of that relationship could be carried to people who did not practice such a custom. My verbal references to ancient practices proved of no avail. Fortunately, I remembered three references from medieval Gujarati literature. One reference was about a king called One reference was about a king calling a woman Bhabi. She took such great insult at this uncalled for affront that she burnt herself and cursed the king who had cast covetous glances at her and dared to call her Bhabi. The original lines were very revealing. Quote, "You are my brother, I am like a sister to you. Our bonds are those of blood, Saga Sambandha. And still you called me Bhabi, you cursed man who pollutes what is sacred." End of quote. The second reference was in a story where a woman fell in love with her stepson. The stepson came from a dangerous adventure, and the mother proposed that to celebrate the occasion they should sit facing each other and feed each other sweets. The son refused. Quote, "Mother, you are proposing an action that is feeding each other, which is done by bride and groom or a bhabi and her husband's younger brother, but never by mother and son." End of quote. The third reference was in a story in which a prince wanted to give up worldly pursuits and become a recluse. A plan was evolved to break the resolve, and the wife of the elder brother of this prince, accompanied by many beautiful women, was made to join him in water sports of the most amorous kind. When I showed these references to the old Pandit, he studied them carefully. He came next day to me, apologized for his antagonistic attitude, and supplied me with a bit of valuable information. He said that in his village, he had heard women of low caste using the word dear or husband's younger brother as a term of abuse towards men. He could not at the time understand its significance, but now he did. Still later, the same gentleman told me that even those castes who said that they did not practice levirate did so when very poor. After that, we had a very thorough talk about the changing attitude to Bhabi among the more educated and urbanized sections of pop people, not only in Gujarat but elsewhere in India too. Kalidasa, the great Sanskrit poet, lived about the 4th century AD. In the fourth act of his drama Shakuntala, he depicts the sending of Shakuntala, the heroine, to her husband's house. This fourth act, in every sentence and verse, depicts the situation in every Hindu household. The parents, happy for having secured a good mate for the daughter, and yet heavy at heart for the long, perhaps lifelong parting from the daughter, the girl anxious to go to her husband and yet unable to leave her childhood's home and companions, both human and animal, everybody slightly fearful as regards the fate of the girl in an unknown house. In even the slightest detail, the attitudes are depicted with wonderful insight. As Shakuntala starts on the journey, her eyes blinded by tears, a pet deer tugs at her sari, the jasmine creeper she had watered stands in her way, her two friends brought up with her as sisters fall on her neck, she sees the aged father trying to gulp his tears and looking round the place which would be desolate without her loving care and happy laughter. The father sends a message to her husband, which would be conciliatory but not cringing, which asks for just treatment to the bride, even if no special favors can be bestowed on her. Then he advises the daughter as to how she should behave in her husband's home. The act ends with the words of her hunts. The act ends with the act ends with the words of her friends straining their eyes to catch a last glimpse of her. Alas, alas, Shakuntala has disappeared in the woods. It is sweet sorrow and yet deep and abiding. It is not enough to know about just the modern setting. In song and drama, in deeply religious poetry and homely proverbs, in almost all languages of India, as far back as literary records exist, we have this situation exploited in 100 different ways. And a study of these illumines the present situation as it is enacted before our very eyes. Words, gestures, customs gain a meaning which would escape us if we did not know this long history and its record. In the same way, the two epics of Mahabharata and Ramayana form an integral part of the present day Indian life. From the beginning of the Christian era up to and well into the modern British period of the Indian history, a very large portion of the literature of India comprises of translations and renderings of the stories of these two epics into the modern languages. These stories have been sung in folk songs and have made their ways into proverbs. They have supplied the norms of behavior to all classes and castes. In India, the term welfare state is translated by the expression Rama Rajya or the kingdom of Rama, and every little fight, whether with blows or in argument, is referred to as the Bharata battle. The Mahabharata battle is considered as marking the end of one cultural period and the beginning of another, but the story is quoted in the present book not because of this, but because it gives us a vivid picture of the patriarchal joint family of ancient India. No territory changed hands in the great battle, no new empire was founded. It is not a story of conquest or political feud. It is simply the story of a huge, big, joint patri family and illustrates the interrelations, the personality development, the feuds, the strength, the weaknesses, and the ethos of the joint family. It is the picture of a family, patri family, making clear all its structural stresses and strains and showing clearly the functioning of all institutions which strengthen it or minimize the forces of dissolution and destruction. The Mahabharata family is found today all over India, and a Mahabharata battle is being fought in most joint families. The idea of status, duties, and rights of members of the joint family are those inherited from and deeply rooted in the traditions of these epics. It would indeed be a pity if an alleged anti historical bias in anthropological studies were to blind us to this valuable record of a past which gives meaning to present conduct and thought. Not only is this knowledge of the past useful to gain an insight into the life of the agricultural population, but it is also necessary for a proper study of those so called primitives. The interrelation of the primitives and the rest of the Indians cannot be evaluated on the analogy of the interrelation of the whites and the primitives. Example, the American Indians and the American whites are of Europeans and Africans, or of Europeans and Maoris. In all these cases, the whites and their primitives developed apart in space and time and then were suddenly thrown together a few hundred years ago. In India, the primitives and the others have lived together for over 2 to 3,000 years. The primitives have almost all the social institutions and elaborations of the non-primitives, while the Hindus actively share all the beliefs of the primitives. In such a context, one must use great precaution before dubbing something as primitive. The penetration into Hindu life of what is thought as primitive and its wrong record is surprising, and a knowledge of it would help to understand better the primitives and the others. I give only two cases from scores known to me. Elvin, in his book on the Baiga, notes the peculiar belief of the Baiga that the rainbow emerges out of an ant hill. This belief was recorded by Kalidasa in one of his poems, Meghaduta, verse 15, line 2, giving a description of the rainy season. Quote, "From the top of an anthill arises the bow of the god Indra." End of quote. In Sanskrit and in modern Indian languages, the rainbow is called Indra's bow. The anthill is the house of the cobra. The cobra is supposed to have a shining jewel on the top of its hood, and the rays emerging from the jewel out of the top of the anthill give rise to the phenomenon known as Indra's bow in the rainy season. This, however, is the explanation of the line by a late commentator. What Kalidasa was actually referring to, we do not know. The Baigas think that the rainbow rises from a god in an anthill. In this context, the Baiga belief raises problems quite different from what they would be if it was merely an isolated Baiga idea. In the same way, Elvin mentions a king or man, Shriyal, and his wife Changuna, appearing in various stories of the Gonds. Shriyal and Changuna are well known personalities in the song and the story of the Maharashtra region. In Karnataka, Shiriyala Shetty and Changalike Avva have a festival of their own. The story of Shriyal and his queen Changuna is told in a late medieval Saivite book, and I understand from my Kannada colleague Professor D.R. Bendre of Sholapur that Shriyal is not merely a mythical personality but is mentioned as an army officer and a petty chief. This story, which apparently had its origin in the south, is found over a very wide region today. It spread into Maharashtra with the Shaiva literature of the south. Was it taken to the Gonds also by itinerant storytellers, or were the Gonds in possession of it before they pushed northwards into the Mahakoshal region? If so, would it give us an approximate date for the northward movement of the Gonds? Does the possession of this story show a cultural affinity of the Gonds with the Kannada people, as some linguists assert on the basis of linguistic analogies? I myself started my enquiry as a field worker and turned to the written records only when I could not understand some of the data I had collected, and found that the written literature helped me to understand my field notes. Words which I had taken down without understanding their full significance became clear when I found them in the context of a story or in a poem. Usages which had appeared strange to my urban upbringing could be placed in their proper setting and perspective when I found them recorded. This does not mean that I could not find, sorry, this does not mean that I could find everything corroborated by record, but even that which was thus not recorded, according to my limited amount of search and reading, gained in meaning from a better knowledge of the recorded elements. A people's literature has a peculiar relation to their social institutions. In some kind of literature, the social institutions are idealized. In another, they are ridiculed. In a third, the literature is starkly realistic. All the time, a particular type of evaluation of social institutions is found in literature, and I found this interrelation of the written or oral literature and the actual social institutions as lived by the people a fascinating study in rationalization, self castigation, self criticism, suggestion, and imitation on the part of a society. The cultural lag between the literary norm and the actual conduct is itself a study of enormous value, and for such complicated cultures as that of India, as essential as the field studies. The following study in kinship is based on personal enquiry, supplemented by readings in Sanskrit, Pali, Ardhamagadi, Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, and Maithili. Inability to read the southern languages has made me feel as if a blank wall stretched before me, and so I endeavored to read Tamil with my colleague Professor C.R. Sankaran. Even that, while reading was of enormous use to me in giving a glimpse into the Tamil thought and idiom, and I record my grateful thanks to him for his kindness and patience. To Indian readers, things like the resume of the Mahabharata story may appear redundant, but I found that the average non Indian anthropologist knew very little of Indian literary traditions and sometimes did not care for them either. To him, this appears as a useless, nostalgic dipping into a vanished past. I assure him that that past lives with us today vividly, obstinately, and sometimes obtrusively, and must be known by anyone who wants to study us today. Section 3. The material on Indian kinship has been presented in the following pages as belonging to four cultural zones. Number 1, the northern, number 2, the central, number 3, the southern, and number 4, the eastern. Zones 1 and 2 comprise the language area of the Sanskritic Indo-European languages. Zone 3 is made up of the Dravidian language area, while the fourth zone includes the scattered area wherein Austric or Mundari languages are spoken. The description of the kinship organization of the northern zone is divided into two parts. The first is devoted to material found in ancient Sanskrit records with a short note which adds kinship terms in Pali found in Buddhist literature and in Ardhamagadi found in Jain literature. These terms are useful for understanding the meaning of modern kinship terms used in Sanskritic and Dravidian languages. The second part is devoted to a description of a generalized model for the whole of northern India called the Northern Zone, and kinship terms in the northern languages, that is Punjabi, Sindhi, Hindi, Bihari, Bengali, Assamese, and Pahari, are given and briefly explained. The central zone includes central India, that is Rajasthan, Vindhya Pradesh, Orissa, Gujarat, Kathiawad, and Maharashtra. In this zone, the languages spoken are predominantly Sanskritic, though it also includes many tribes speaking Dravidian and Mundari languages, as will become evident from the map. The kinship organization in the central zone, though modeled on the northern pattern, shows some very significant differences which can best be described as being due to culture contact with the other two zones, especially the southern zone of the Dravidian language area. The description of the southern zone is given in two parts. The first part tries to give the whole Dravidian system and its difference from the northern system. In the second part, short descriptions of the kinship systems and terms of the linguistic regions of the Dravidian area are given. The author thinks that her interpretation of the southern system is of great significance for Indian cultural anthropology. The kinship organizations in the various regions within this language area and of different castes and tribes within each region are presented as functional adjustment necessitated by culture contact. The eastern zone and its kinship organization are described in the next chapter. The concluding chapter indicates some important problems for research arising out of the present investigation. End of chapter. Next is chapter 2, the kinship organization of the northern zone, the past. Okay, we'll go to that in the next video.